Now, lots of original standards don't even look like what we use today. Some of the original standards, like 10-base-2 and 10-base-5, were derivatives of the original thick and thin Ethernet that was defined by the Digital Intel Xerox Consortium. In fact, 10-base-5, as it was called, which stands for 10 megabit baseband and 500 meters, was the thick Ethernet standard that was originally defined by Digital Intel Xerox. It had a capability per run of going 500 meters. This was the maximum limitation, but it was quite expensive. It was actually called thick Ethernet due to the thickness of the cable. This was a coaxial cable, but it was very, very thick, very stiff, very reliable, very unbreakable, and utilized vampire taps to tap into it. You needed to plug in a PC with this external transceiver, and it was actually quite an expensive technology. It really rivaled some of the other competitors as far as expenses are concerned. So somebody came up with the option of utilizing what was called thin Ethernet, where the coaxial cable size was actually reduced down to about a third. We saw 10-base-2, which was 10 megabit still baseband, but now it was limited to only about 200 meters. You can see the actual limitation in the standard was 185 meters. Lots of people like to call this cheaper net instead of Ethernet because it was effectively the same in function as the thick Ethernet standard. But the components that made up thin Ethernet standards were themselves much cheaper. It would actually use a network card that had a coaxial connection on the back. And then you would use a T connector and simply daisy chain all of the systems together. At one end, you had to have it grounded, and both ends had to be terminated using a terminator at the end of the T connector. But nonetheless, it did prove to be a very popular standard for people to get into Ethernet and utilize the 10 megabit speed in cost-effective fashion. However, there was a big problem, because every system was reliant upon this connection never being broken. If somebody were to break the wire in between two PCs, it would cause all kinds of strange effects. For example, one half of the network may go down. The middle of the network may go down. The other half of the network may go down. It was difficult to troubleshoot and difficult to maintain. Therefore, at one point, a new standard was introduced which was called 10-base-T, which stood for 10 megabit baseband, but it now used twisted pair Ethernet. The idea was to place the bus topology inside an Ethernet concentrator, and every single system would have a dedicated line back to that concentrator. If that line was broken, it would only affect that system. It would utilize unshielded twisted pair with the maximum distance limitation from the main concentrator of only 100 meters, which was not very far, but nonetheless it provided with a little bit better reliability, and it provided with a much cheaper solution. A single concentrator and a bunch of very cheap cabling, along with a card upgrade, and we could now have a very easy implementation of twisted pair Ethernet.